So many people are walking through life wanting to solve problems of connection and purpose and productivity and trying to do it. And they don't even realize they're doing this, but they're holding their lives, and especially the people in their lives, at arm's length. And this is what I call covert avoidance. Covert avoidance. You look like you're engaged deeply with your life, but actually you're distracted, you're making plans and then canceling them, you're setting goals and then wiping them from your mind, and you're not being present for the people who are in your life. So everything stays shallow, nothing goes anywhere, and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. The ability to connect with people and form real relationships is often damaged in those of us who were neglected or abused as kids. And this is a huge reason why so many of us go through life sometimes feeling alone and like we don't belong anywhere and never feel quite loved. There's a reason, usually unconscious, for this, that we do it. And I want to talk about that because with practice, you can gradually heal that. Now, as you know, I'm not a therapist. I'm someone who has recovered from the sense of disconnection that was driven by trauma in my own life and the ways that I was still, holding life at arm's length, even when I thought I was doing everything right. So now I share my method with anyone who wants to learn how I did it, how to recover from those symptoms and connect more fully with people and life. Now, when you pull away from people and intentionally isolate yourself, and that's common, it's called avoidance. But with covert avoidance, you're not isolating intentionally. You might have a good career, you're friendly, you're interesting, there are people in your life, maybe even a spouse or partner, but there are these hidden, covert ways that you keep your interactions brief and superficial. You keep one foot out of relationships all the time without anyone quite knowing that that's your pattern. Sometimes you don't even realize it, but if you've been trying to connect better with people and improve your life, and it's just not going very well yet, it could be time to look at whether you're unwittingly sabotaging your own efforts with covert avoidance. To be happy and to fulfill your potential, you'll have to be able to form warm and trusting relationships with other people. And if when I say that, you feel like, dang, I don't want to do that, I do understand. And I know for a few people, they're so traumatized they really can't do people right now, and that's okay. You can keep listening to think about what you might want to do in the future to reconnect. For people with past trauma who get dysregulated, it is stressful putting yourself out there. But personal growth can only go so far in isolation. So if you're faking your connections, you are faking your life. So what can you do? Well, the first is know the signs. Here they are. Number one, you find yourself surrounded by people. These could be family, groups you're in, friends, but you hold yourself a little bit apart from them. Two, you're good at appearing and sounding like you're enthusiastic about time with other people, but you secretly don't look forward to it. Three, you often claim to be too busy or too tired to follow through on commitments or to agree to plans. Four, your partner or your friends complain that you're far away, uninterested, or uncommitted, even though you do and say all the right things to convince them otherwise. Five, you often cancel appointments at the last minute or you're late. Six, when you go to social gatherings, you look for ways to keep conversations short. Seven, in groups where everyone is supposed to contribute, like a fundraiser or a potluck dinner, for example, you tend to contribute less than other people. Eight, when you tell people why you can't come to or didn't show up at the event where you were invited, you tend to exaggerate problems, even fib, lie about them, like say you were sick or you got injured or you were too busy or you got stuck in traffic. That's a favorite. 9, you tend to go for partners who are unavailable, inappropriate, or not into you. And most of your relationships feel superficial. And you might feel pain about this, but you do it again and again, so it's a pattern. It's a pattern of covert avoidance. 10 is you don't like disappointing people, but eventually you often do. So that's what covert avoidance looks like. Some of us do it by looking at our phones all the time. Some of us do it by taking unfulfilling jobs and then hating them and postponing the day when we'll start living our life for real, maybe after we leave the job that we never should have taken in the first place. And then we've got a great excuse not to volunteer at the school or take a walk with a friend, right? Or we stay with people we never loved, just buying some time for that day when we can emotionally handle making changes. But we can't right now, we think. Though we seldom realize it, we're using avoidance to hold dysregulation at bay, playing fake with the good people right in front of us and wondering, why do I feel so alone? Now, once you have a way to calm your triggers and reduce the amount of dysregulation that sort of comes up, and just like nervous system dysregulation is really common for traumatized people. Everybody has some. But once you learn to calm that down, your trauma wounds can no longer cut you off from your own life. So have you experienced any of the covert avoidance behaviors that I listed? Do you think you're drawn to these behaviors as a way to manage dysregulation, where you feel clumsy and awkward and flustered and overwhelmed and maybe spaced out? Like sometimes hanging out with people is so stressful, there's this price to pay that you get dysregulation, and it could last for days. Now, if you think about it, what are these avoiding behaviors costing you? Maybe you're doing it because you're trying to manage your dysregulation. Most of us don't realize that's what we're doing. But what is it costing you in terms of closeness and joy and accomplishment and love in your life? I encourage you to take time to think about this. Your whole future can be so much more wonderful when you can just shift your avoidant behaviors just a little bit and open your heart to other people and allow your life to gently expand from the limited little box that you've had yourself in. Now, if the thought of this makes you cringe, that's avoidance. And it's really normal for people who had trauma when they were kids. And you may have learned to look okay on the outside, being cheerful and appropriate and functioning well enough. But you probably also learned to protect your inner state, protect your energy by avoiding any kind of situation that might trigger and drain you. And when I say trigger, I'm talking about a stimulus that causes you to get neurologically dysregulated. And that's everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. Virtually everybody knows how to get back out of it. But for people with trauma, it happens more easily, it happens more intensely, it's a little harder to get out of. But again, your cognition is a little bit off, you're having trouble focusing your thoughts, you're feeling brain fogged or fuzzy, you feel clumsy, or your emotions come out too strong. It's like an emotional dysregulation. So sometimes people with early trauma, especially from childhood, will tend to have a lot more dysregulation and a harder time getting back to a regulated state. And we can all learn to get re-regulated. And if you're a fan of this channel, you know that I talk about this all the time. It's the subject of my book, Re-Regulated. I'm all about this. If you can learn to re-regulate your nervous system, you all of a sudden have a lot more latitude to be social, to tolerate situations that are uncertain for you or even a little uncomfortable. And alongside of getting re-regulated, you can learn handy skills like setting boundaries. When you have boundaries, you can afford to, go to a party or go on a date because you already know, if it gets weird, I can get out of this situation. So re-regulation, it's what I teach, it's what my online courses are all about, it's what transformed my life from being tossed in, just like a tornado of emotions and brain fog and health problems after my trauma to get back on my feet, feeling good and thinking straight again. Now, dysregulation gets triggered by a stimulus, sometimes by a thought or feeling, sometimes by something outside yourself like a loud noise or someone criticizing you, or you get ostracized, people leave you out. It hurts, right? But it also can set off this whole thing where your nervous system stops working. And it's not just cognitive and emotional, it's physiological. Dysregulation is a big underlying cause of chronic disease. It's not just your thinking processes. It's your nervous system governs your entire body, your hormones, your immune system, your vital signs, your heart, your breathing. So when that stuff starts glitching, disease can get in, and pain and depression and problems of all kinds. The risk goes up if you're living your life dysregulated. So those triggers of people, criticism, ostracization, they hurt everybody. But for a person who's been hurt by trauma, maybe neglected in childhood, it can make you feel destroyed. It can trigger a period of dysregulation that makes it hard to think and focus and function for days or years for some people. And it's a huge price to pay for something that's easy for most other people, just dealing with people and social interactions, right? And to manage that dysregulation, because it has to be managed, it gets tricky when you don't have knowledge of what's actually going on, you don't have tools for re-regulating, and you don't have support from people who understand what is going on. So a lot of us will quietly just start pulling away, avoiding, quietly, covertly pulling away from people. Not at all planning to do it forever. We always think it's just for a minute, just to collect ourselves. And it does kind of work for a while. You can get some peace by saying no whenever people invite you to do something, or say yes, but cancel later. You can get peace by working from home, not answering the phone, or keeping things casual in your love life. Yeah, you can, sort of, maybe for a while, but you're buffering against your own life because it feels like the next interaction is just too much. So you put a few social interactions one after another, and it'll feel like too much. It'll feel like it's going to destroy you. And in your mind, it's going to get better any minute. Maybe if you could just get a little peace, you could be amazing. You could connect better. You could choose better. You could make more money and be more beautiful and enjoy your life more. We rationalize avoiding life, right? Like we think, oh, I'll call that person next week. I'll start tomorrow. But here's the first huge reason why it's important to heal this. If you go to such lengths to protect yourself from the way you feel around people, that destroys you too. So you can't win. You either go in there and get all dysregulated, feel destroyed, or you avoid everybody and you feel destroyed. So there has to be a middle ground solution. And there is. Without connection, your development gets frozen. On the outside, you might look confident and accomplished, but inside, you're like a sad little child walking around. Now, I call the problem covert avoidance because it's not like avoidant personality disorder, which is an extreme kind of anxiety and social avoidance on a level that would be fairly noticeable to other people. The thing that I call covert avoidance isn't noticeable to other people. You seem okay, you're interacting with the world, but also holding yourself apart from it. Now, one big sign of covert avoidance is when you're too busy or too tired all the time to do normal things that a person in your position would do, like keeping your living space tidy, making decent food for yourself and maybe your kids, going to bed on time, getting up on time. When you're avoiding this level of functioning, it's an inward directed kind of avoidance. And then there are the outward behaviors, such as being late to things. It's normal to be late occasionally, but if you're known for being late and you're late by about the same number of minutes every time, that's avoidance. Now, that was a big obvious sign I had back in the days when I was near the end of my first marriage, when my kids were small. I was late to everything. There's a t-shirt I've seen online before that says, like, sorry, I'm late. I didn't really want to be here. I didn't know that's how I felt, but that is how I felt. I was late to everything. If I said I'd come to your house at noon, I'd be there at 12:10 or 12:20. If a call started at 8 a.m., I'd join in at 8:02. If a group of friends were meeting up for a hike, I'd keep everyone waiting in the parking lot for 15 minutes and then get there all, harried and going, traffic. And I always had my reasons. There was traffic, yeah, sometimes. I had kids, I was busy, and I was juggling a lot of stuff. It's all true. And here's the sign. I was always telling people how busy I was. Do you ever do that? Is that kind of your mantra, your public mantra? People would ask me how I was. How have you been, Anna? And I'd go, busy. I've been really busy. And I'd say it almost like it was like I was bragging, right? Like it was a badge of accomplishment. So great that it excused my inconsiderate behavior, right? As if I were in a special class of people who are exempt from common courtesy. Yeah, that's not right. People didn't like it. I know now that my busyness was understandable, but the way that I let it affect other people wasn't always a good sign about how I was managing my life. And that my, broadcasting busy, I'm so busy, the busyness to the world was actually a form of covert avoidance. Being busy all the time and talking about being busy was an attempt to, shield myself, keep everyone's focus out here and not in here where I wasn't feeling that great about myself. Do you do that? Because for me, even though I was juggling a lot at the time, I was a working, divorced mother of little kids. Sure, you could take everything I did in a day, to which I was showing up late, and do it in the same amount of time, but just shifting the time to 20 minutes earlier. And then I'd be on time for everything, and it just would have been less stressful, and it would have helped me connect better to other people. In my mind, I couldn't make that shift because I was too busy. But in reality, I was shutting people out. I was shutting my life out. I needed that buffer, I felt. I was angry at my life, and I didn't want to be in it. And I was ashamed. I didn't want people to see, how I was struggling and failing. And that's not really a good strategy either, to sort of hide when you need help. And in particular, I was unhappy about how my marriage ended. And I was emotionally overwhelmed, and pretty much all the time. And before the marriage ended, I was just I was trying to hold on to the marriage, and I would sort of manage that by keeping everything else in my life at arm's length. So, what ends up happening when you do that, when it ends, is you're disconnected from your whole life. So here's the second reason I'm giving you today about why now is a good time to start healing your covert avoidance. When you start opening up to real connection with people, you will begin to see more clearly what you've been afraid to look at in your own life. Whatever you have felt ashamed of, whatever has felt undoable for you. And when you stop hiding, you'll be better able to see. Now, back in the days when I was shutting people out, I didn't know exactly how to start opening up to people, how to make that work. And it hadn't gone well for me. And back then I didn't know that what was going on with me was PTSD from childhood. And I thought I was just a big secret failure, some sort of strange exception compared to other people who just struggled more than everybody else. And I was trying really hard to have good relationships, and I was going about it all wrong. I was trying not to be any trouble for people, probably an old idea left over from childhood that my feelings and needs and even my existence were a problem for other people. So I just try to muddle through. And getting through hard times all by yourself is a good thing to know how to do, but there comes a time when the avoidance has to stop if you're going to be happy. So it came to a head when I had a few years where a huge medical problem from an injury had snowballed into a whole series of surgeries that kept having complications. And this was right when my kid's dad and I separated, and we were hardly speaking to each other. And because for years I'd formed only superficial, put on a happy face friendships, I wasn't close to anyone anymore. And that meant I had almost no support. So one time I went a whole week in the hospital with just one visitor for maybe an hour. And when it was time to go home, I needed somebody who could come pick me up and drive me. Literally, by law, they can't let you just take a cab home from the hospital. So somebody known to you has to drive you. So while I could see other people in the hospital getting flowers and hugs and happy families coming to drive them home, I had to make 10 phone calls to find anybody who would spend a couple of hours driving me home. Someone came. It was my meditation teacher, Paul Brown, and he's wonderful. But he came. He came 3 times for me, and God bless him, and anybody who helped me at all during that time. I remember Paul got me some takeout food and got me settled on the sofa and kept me company for a little while. But this had been going on a long time, me not having the support that I needed. When you have small kids and you've had a lot of surgery, you physically need people to help you, or you're going to end up, just not being able to heal. And that is exactly what was happening to me. But this had been going on a long time, not having the kind of relationships that could sustain me in hard times like that. And that's what chronic avoidance will get you. You might get through one crisis by avoiding people in life, but the next crisis will come and lay you low. You'll face for real what's left when you spent years thinking that you had no choice but to protect yourself, protecting that fragile place inside that lives in fear of being judged and left out and alone. You really do end up alone when you avoid. And that's the third reason I'm giving you why now is the time to heal covert avoidance. When life gets hard, you'll need people who care about you. And they'll care for you because there's a long history of close connection, caring both ways, along with love and friendship and practical things. there may come a time when handling everything in isolation isn't going to be enough. You're going to need help, and that's uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially people like me who were neglected as kids. I just like to feel like I can do everything by myself. But help is a beautiful word, and you can begin to grow these lifelines of help right now by asking for help, offering help, and learning to set boundaries so that when someone asks too much from you, you know how to say no in the nicest possible way. You can also support your healing of avoidance by learning to calm triggers that make closeness with people just challenging, right? You can learn my method for that in my free course, The Daily Practice, and I'll link that in the description section down below too. Covert avoidance is an unconscious, usually, reaction to things that are triggery for you. And when you can reduce your reactivity to those types of things, you have more choices about how you want to respond. Maybe you need less contact with hurtful people or more contact with supportive people. Who these people are will become clearer to you when you're more regulated and less reactive. And finally, you can raise your awareness of covert avoidance and begin noticing, where are you doing it? One friend of mine who said she used to go to parties with a camera around her neck, she said she would do that so that she could have a camera, and if she were speaking with somebody for more than a couple minutes and it started to feel uncomfortable for her, she could go, okay, and she had a little excuse to leave the conversation and pretend to take pictures. Or she would carry a pen and a clipboard in her hand to a party, but it just looks like you're sort of in the middle of something. So you can always walk around as if you're enjoying the party like an observer, but never risk getting ignored in a conversation or trapped in a conversation where you don't have the boundaries to get out of it. Covert avoidance is subtle. It often comes along with wobbly boundaries. We find ourselves, as a result, collapsed on the sofa every evening. And even at home, we can do covert avoidance with people we love. Just going through the motions. How are you? Great, okay. Or we stay with people we never loved, just buying some time for that day when we can emotionally handle making changes. You can do avoidance through food, drugs, video games, or anything that numbs you, telling yourself that as soon as you can stop, you're going to get out of there and start your life again. I totally get it. And until you have a way to calm your triggers and handle stress when it comes, because it always comes, your trauma symptoms are going to dictate that you will be cut off from your own life. So thankfully, there is a way to calm your triggers and re-regulate, so you don't have to avoid anything. You don't have to fix your whole life at once either, which is good. Sometimes if you just orient yourself toward healing, and you can do one small thing a day, then more changes follow naturally. Are you ready for one thing? All right, here's a list of signs that trauma from the past is actually hurting your ability to connect with people in your life today. It's a free PDF, and I can give it to you. You can download it right there, and I will see you very soon.